The air went out of the world the day Elias Thorne disappeared. Not with a bang, but with the chilling echo of perfect, untraceable silence. He was a man who defined presence, a towering figure in the exploration of the world's most desolate psychological landscapes, yet his vanishing act was absolute, profound, and immediate. Elias Thorne, the celebrated philosopher and environmentalist whose essays on intentional living had guided millions, simply stepped off the map, dissolving into the white noise of an unnamed Patagonian ice field. Years bled into one another, turning hope into mythology, transforming the search for a body into the search for a metaphor. The world had accepted his loss, filing the tragedy under the heading of unforeseen destiny. Then, 5 years after the beacon had flatlined, a recovery team specializing in deep freeze retrieval found it. Not a body, not wreckage, but a battered, heavily insulated satellite uplink, partially exposed from the melting ice line, and inside its reinforced memory banks, encrypted behind layers of redundant self-preservation coding, lay a single, sprawling message, timed precisely 6 minutes and 37 seconds before his final location signal flatlined forever. The global pause that followed the discovery was palpable, a moment of collective holding of breath waiting for the decoding process to conclude. This was not merely forensic evidence. It was the final testament of a man who had intentionally positioned himself on the absolute precipice of human endurance. The question echoed across every continental divide. What does a mind, stripped bare of all civilization, all distraction, and facing the ultimate, undeniable void, decide is important enough to commit to the digital ether? This message had to be the summation of a life lived intensely, a legacy instruction, a final, urgent whisper delivered from the razor-thin boundary between existence and oblivion. It was the ultimate, distilled truth, purchased at the highest possible price. Elias Thorne, the cartographer of the soul, had not vanished accidentally. He had sought the great silence, a self-imposed, meticulously planned exile to the furthest unnamed reach of the Patagonian ice fields. Chasing a theory of psychological purity, he termed the zero-point existence. His final journey was meant to be the capstone of his life's work, a masterpiece of introspection, documenting the necessary brutality of the human spirit untainted by social noise and modern convenience. He prepared for months, leaving detailed logistical plans for his equipment and routing, but conspicuously lacking was any detailed protocol for his return. It was clear, in hindsight, that the message he intended to leave was the true objective, not survival itself. The immediate conflict that arose upon decryption was not geographical, it was philosophical. The message wasn't a log entry, wasn't a set of final coordinates, and most frustratingly for the search teams, wasn't a plea for rescue. It was a sprawling stream of consciousness reflection, almost a poetic manifesto, segmented into 3 distinct movements and strangely codified. The immediate, agonizing question for the executors of his estate and the millions of readers worldwide wasn't where Elias was, but why he chose to frame his final, precious words as a riddle designed specifically for those he left behind. The tension escalated because the message seemed deliberately and profoundly unhelpful regarding his physical whereabouts, yet undeniably and universally helpful regarding the fundamental meaning of a well-lived life. The fragments introduced agonizing open loops, pulling the reader inexorably into a deep labyrinth of thought. He spoke repeatedly of the geometry of forgiveness, detailing the painful angles created by sustained resentment. He referenced the weight of undone kindness, cataloging the insidious cumulative cost of holding back compassion. But the most mystifying anchor, the element that required the most profound internal decryption, was the repeated invocation of the third reflection. These were not casual phrases, they were kernels of ultimate wisdom, promising radical revelation but initially delivering only escalating mystery and demanding radical introspection. What precisely was the third reflection? Why did a man who prided himself on absolute self-reliance focus his final energy on the abstract concept of forgiveness? The academic world mobilized immediately. Linguists, existential philosophers, theologians, and even theoretical physicists were called upon to analyze the syntax, the cadence, and the layered metaphors of the Thorne message. It quickly became apparent that the text was not addressed to any single person, but rather to the very idea of a future self, a universal human consciousness navigating the perennial struggles of limitation and time. It functioned as an instruction manual for living only after one has truly accepted the finite nature of existence, a concept many found too terrifying to face without the buffer of everyday life. Elias wrote extensively about the inherent fallacy of waiting. He meticulously detailed the insidious systemic ways that humanity postpones joy, defers crucial, defining conversations, and hoards emotional capital under the false, comforting belief that time is an infinite resource. His tone, previously known for its measured analytical calm, now burned with the fierce urgency of a man stripped of future seconds. He chronicled the tragedy of the incomplete sentence, the inherent cowardice found in perpetual preparation, and the psychological burden of delayed authenticity. He saw the postponed life as the ultimate form of self-sabotage, where the promise of a better tomorrow constantly cannibalizes the reality of today. We treat our lives as a perpetual rehearsal, one dense passage read, meticulously translated from its original compressed prose. We stand on the stage of the present, worrying over the script for the third act, while the actual defining performance unfolds, unobserved and unappreciated, right now. The vast majority of human sorrow is simply the inventory of delayed actions, the words left unspoken, the journeys left untaken, the forgiveness left ungranted, all tucked away, gathering the corrosive dust of the imagined future. He described the ice field not as a grave, but as a crucible that burned away the inessential, leaving only the purest, non-negotiable forms of truth. The cold, the isolation, the undeniable march toward the final silence forced a ruthless audit of the self. What survived the audit, what remained when the distractions of civilization were stripped away, was the bedrock of his message. It was a searing indictment of the comfortable life that allows one to forget that their true, authentic self resides only in the immediacy of the current moment. He noted that the weight of these undone kindnesses and delayed authenticities was exponentially heavier than any physical burden he carried across the ice. This is the central, unavoidable gravitational pull of the message. We must remember the context. Every single word in this document was typed by freezing fingers, under a sky that offered no reprieve, recorded in the few fleeting seconds before silence claimed the writer entirely. This wasn't armchair philosophy devised in the comfort of a study. It was truth forged in the final, desperate, unforgiving furnace of human limitation. The sheer, undeniable weight of his impending end gave every syllable the undeniable ring of objective, absolute truth. Elias Thorne was not telling the world what he believed in the abstract. He was transmitting, under duress, what he knew when everything else, hope, physical safety, the future, had been ruthlessly stripped away. The climax of the message, the great, essential revelation, lay in the unlocking of the third reflection. Elias explained that the first reflection is the necessary act of looking backward, acknowledging and learning from our mistakes and past sorrows. The second reflection is the forward-looking act, planning goals, charting trajectories, and aspiring to a better state. These two reflections, he noted, are widely practiced, but they only serve to keep us hovering outside the true self. The third reflection, he concluded, is the terrifying and essential act of recognizing your current self, the body breathing right now, the mind thinking these thoughts right now, the self capable of action in this second, as the only self you will ever truly possess. It is the existential confrontation with the present moment as the totality of your power. He argued that the vast majority of human lives are tragically lived either lamenting the past or negotiating for the future, rendering the present moment merely a dilapidated, overlooked transit station. His final desperate message was a demand, an absolute imperative delivered from the threshold of extinction: stop traveling. Be here. The present is not a waiting room, it is the destination. This realization, he wrote, was inextricably linked to the geometry of forgiveness. Elias revealed that holding onto grudges, resentment, and past harms creates sharp, debilitating, restrictive angles in one's own heart, forcing the holder to constantly maneuver around self-imposed emotional spikes and obstacles. This internal geometry of conflict is what keeps the soul bound to the past, preventing arrival in the present. True profound freedom, he declared, was the radical act of flattening that aggressive geometry into a smooth, expansive plane of unconditional acceptance, both for others and, crucially, for the self. Forgiveness was not an act of charity toward the perpetrator, it was an act of architectural liberation for the victim. Only in this flattened, open space could one truly inhabit the third reflection. Elias Thorne did not send a final message asking to be saved from the engulfing ice and the inevitable silence. He sent a detailed, high-stakes rescue map for the millions trapped in the conventional, unexamined, postponed life. His final words transcended the reality of his death, turning his personal tragedy into a universal manifesto for radical, present-tense, unburdened living. He vanished so that his wisdom might finally be heard, amplified by the undeniable finality of his circumstance. His disappearance was not a failure of exploration, but the ultimate, successful exploration of self. His legacy is not the silence he found, but the urgent, demanding voice he left behind, urging us not to wait for our own final, frigid moments to finally live. The message waits for you now, decoded and transcribed, an open challenge demanding immediate adherence. It begs the terrifying, clarifying question. If your own final message were recorded today, right now, with absolute certainty that this was your final communication, what essential, non-negotiable truth would you sacrifice everything to ensure the world heard? Do not wait for the ice to claim you to finally start writing it. Live it. The message is not meant to be read, it is meant to be embodied.